Hello, good day. So I will be presenting on the electric charge and electric field. So for this presentation, we will going to talk about theories, principles, as well as do some calculations with regards to electric charge and electric field. So by the way, I'm Clark Dominic Piragadi, a first year MSSE physics student. Okay, to formally start, allow me to present first our learning points for this topic. Okay, so the first one is in this topic, we're going to know the nature of electric charge and how we know that electric charge is conserved. Second, to know how objects become electrically charged. Third, how to use Coulomb's law to calculate the electric force between charges. Fourth, to know the distinction between electric force and electric field. And fifth, to know how to calculate the electric field due to collection of charges. So let's begin by having a short review on the structure of an atom. So it's important to know the structure of an atom because fundamentally, electrical properties, specifically charges, arises due to the structure of an atom. Specifically, due to its composition, we call the subatomic particles. Okay, so here's the structure of our atom. So as we know, our atom has a nucleus and an electron cloud. So in the nucleus, we can find the proton and the neutron held together by the strong nuclear force. So proton is the positively charged subatomic particle of the atom with a mass of 1.673 times 10 to the power of negative 27 kilogram. And the neutron has no charge, having a mass of 1.675 times 10 to the power of 27 kilograms. So additional info, the proton and the neutron are combinations of other entities called quarks. So the positive charge and the no charge of the proton and neutron respectively arise due to these quarks. Specifically, the composition of proton and neutrons are up quarks and down quarks. So the proton has two up quarks and one down quark resulting to a positive charge. And our neutron has two down quarks and one up quark resulting to no charge. Meanwhile, our electron can be found in the electron cloud, having the negative charge with a mass of 9.109 times 10 to the power of negative 31 kilogram. Okay, so what's an electric charge? So let's have a brief historical background on the matter. So first, the word electric is derived from the Greek word electron, meaning amber. So way back in the times of the ancient Greeks, they discovered that amber, when rubbed with fur, was able to attract other objects. So in contemporary science, specifically in physics, we can say that the amber has gained a net electric charge or has become charged. So electric charge can be defined as the fundamental property of subatomic particles that gives rise to the phenomenon of experiencing force in the presence of electric and magnetic fields. So these fields exert influence on charged particles resulting in observable effects. So one of the observable phenomena shown by charged particles is electric repulsion and attraction. So electric repulsion happens when you have either two positive charge or two negative charges. What will happen if you try to put together positive charges, though they would repel each other. Same goes with two negative charges. Meanwhile, electric attraction happens when there are two particles with opposite charges. So one is positive and the other one is negative. Okay. So the attraction and repulsion of two charged objects are sometimes summarized as like charges repel and opposite charges attract. So when can we say that an object is positively charged or negatively charged? So we can say that an object or a particle is positively charged when there are fewer electrons than protons, which results to a positive net charge. Or in other words, there are more protons than electrons. So it would result to a positive net charge. Meanwhile, if there are more electrons than protons, so it would result to a negative charge, meaning that object is negatively charged. Okay, so again, positively charged, fewer electrons than protons, negatively charged, more electrons than protons. And if there are equal number of protons and electrons, so there is no charge. Again, if there is equal number of electrons and protons, there will be no charge. Okay, so let's try to look at and examine these three atoms. So on the first side, by the way, so these three atoms are all atoms of lithium since there are three protons in each of these atoms. Okay, so the first atom on the left, so we can see that there are three protons and four neutrons on the nucleus and three electrons on the electron cloud. So three protons, that would result to a 3 plus charge. And then we know neutrons has no charge. And then three electrons has 3 results to negative 3 charge. If you're going to add 3 plus and 3 minus, that will result to 0 net charge. Meaning this atom on the left is a neutral atom. And then the atom on the middle has 3 protons and 2 electrons. So meaning there are more protons compared to the electrons. So meaning that would result to a positive net charge. Or we can call this atom in the middle a positive ion. And this atom on the right, so we can see that there are more electrons than protons. So there are 4 electrons and then 3 protons. So it would result to a negative net charge. So we can call this an atom on the right a negative ion. So again, let me repeat. If there are more electrons than protons, it's negatively charged. And if there are fewer electrons than protons, it's positively charged. And if there are equal number of protons and electrons, so it will result to no charge or a neutral atom. Okay, so we have here ionization. So we talk about more electrons or fewer electrons. So this happens when electrons actually move from atom to atom. So again, if an atom gains an electron, meaning it would increase the number of electrons, making it negatively charged. And then if an atom releases or loses an electron, meaning that it would become a positive ion since it would have more protons than its electrons. By the way, in physics or in electricity, so we usually refer to the transfer of we usually uh, talk ionization in the perspective of electrons because once again, protons and neutrons are bound together by the strong nuclear force at the nucleus, meaning it would require a tremendous energy for it to be removed from the nucleus. Uh, except unlike the electrons where they are loosely bound on the electron cloud, so it would just need a minimal energy for them to be moved from atom to atom. So that's ionization. So before we continue with our discussion, there are two very important principles that we have to understood. So first is the conservation of charge. So this conservation of charge states that the algebraic sum of all the electric charges in any closed system is constant. So say for example, you have a closed system. When we say closed system, it's a system where nothing enters and nothing leaves that system. Okay? So for example, you have a closed system having two atoms, and then these two atoms are constantly interchanging electrons. So if you try to count the number of electrons and the number of protons throughout the existence of the closed system, it should be constant. So say for example, if there are 10 electrons at the start of the exchange, at the end of the exchange, there should all still be 10 electrons in that particular system. So again, conservation of charge, meaning charges in a closed system is constant. The next principle is charge is quantized. So electric charge exists only in discrete indivisible units, specifically as integer multiples of the elementary charge, which is the charge of a single electron or proton. So we have here charged proton has a charge of positive 1.602 times 10 to the power of negative 19 coulombs. By the way, coulombs is the unit for charge. And then for the charge of an electron, that's the same magnitude but negative. Okay, so when we say quantized, so it's not possible for us to have a charge equivalent to a charge of a 1.5 electron because in nature 1.5 electron does not exist. Okay? Same with our money, di ba? We cannot have money, physical money amounting to less than a centavo because there's no available money in that kind of amount. Again, same with charge. Again, charge is quantized, meaning you cannot have multiples of a proton or an electron that is not an integer. So meaning 2.1 charge equivalent to an electron is not possible. Only those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so on that are integers can exist in nature. So again, charge is quantized. Okay, so to solve the charge Q produced by an n number of protons or electrons, we can use the formula. So for protons, actually there it is it's just the same formula but with different signs. Because again, for protons, it's positively charged. That is why we use the formula Q equals to positive Ne. And then for electrons, that's the same. Q is equals to negative Ne. So where Q is the charge in columns, N is the number of charged particles, and E is the elementary charge, equivalent to 1.602 times 10 to the power of negative 19. So let's try calculating a problem with regards to this equation. So we have here sample problem number 1. So how much charge can 3 million electrons produce? So we're looking for the charge. So we're looking for Q. So let's start by writing the given. So we have a given. So we are provided with the number of electrons. So we have 3 million electrons. Okay? So n is equals to 3 million. That's equivalent to 3 times 10 to the power of 6. Okay, electrons. And then we are looking for our charge. Oh, sorry. So again, n is equals to 3 times 10 to the power of 6. Then we are looking for the charge. And then we know our elementary charge. That is 1.602 times 10 to the power of negative 19 column. So question, what formula are we going to use? Q equals to positive Ne or Q equals to negative Ne? Okay, since we are given with electrons, so we are going to use the formula Q is equals to negative Ne. Okay, again, it's negative because we're dealing with electrons. Okay, so let's substitute the values. So Q is equals to, we have negative 3 times 10 to the power of 6 multiplied by the elementary charge 1.602 times 10 to the power of negative 19. Okay, so calculating that, so we have, that would yield to negative 4.806 times 10 to the power of negative 13 columns. Okay, or that's equivalent to Q is equals to negative 0.4806 pico column. Okay, so that would be our answer. Okay, so here's the solution that you can look at clearly once we remove the annotations. So that's our answer. Next, we have here conductors, insulators, and induced charges. So solid state materials can be classified based on their electrical conductivity. So when you say electrical conductivity, is the property of a material in which it is the measure of which a material allows the flow of charges or electricity. Okay? So first, solid state material is the conductor. So substances or materials that allow electric charge to flow through it. So these are conductors. So conductors possess a sea of electrons that are not tightly bound to individual atoms and can move relatively free. So most metals are good conductors. So since again, conductors possess sea of electrons, so meaning they have a lot of electrons that are far away from the nucleus, meaning in the valence shell. So if they are around very far away from the nucleus, it would only need a tiny amount of energy for them to be moved from atom to atom. That is why conductors are good. Conductors allow the flow of electrons or the flow of charges. So examples of these are we have silver, copper, aluminum, and gold. So by the way, the best conductor is silver. Okay. Next, we have here insulators. So these are materials that have tightly bound electrons that are not easily detached from their atoms. So this lack of free electrons prevents the flow of charge. So most nonmetals are insulators. So unlike conductors who have sea of free electrons, insulators are tightly packed. So their electrons are tightly bound together, meaning it's not easy to detach them from their atoms, requiring a lot of energy. So most nonmetals are insulators. So the best example of insulator is the rubbers. If you have observed, so in our electrical wirings, di ba, inside there's a metal, usually copper, and then outside it was wrapped by rubber. So the rubber, uh, the rubber was used to prevent electrical contact because it's an insulator to prevent hazardous phenomena like electrocution. Okay, next. So that's a typographical error. So this should be semiconductor. So this is semiconductor. Semiconductors are halfway between conductors and insulators. So they have an electrical conductivity between of that of conductors and insulators. And their charge carrying properties can be manipulated by doping with impurities or by external factors. Examples are silicon and germanium. So these semiconductors has a lot of applications, specifically in electronics, because most of our electronic components are made of semiconductors, specifically our uh, what do you call this? Our transistors. Okay, transistors are made of semiconductors, usually silicon. So these transistors can be found all over our computers, specifically in the motherboard or the CPU of our computer. Our CPU or the core of our computer are made up of millions of semiconductors or made up of millions of transistors made out of semiconductor. Okay. So those are the three solid state materials that can be classified based on their electrical conductivity. So again, if the material allows the flow of charge or electricity, it's a conductor. Okay, so if it does not allow the flow of charge, it's a insulator. It's an insulator. So if it is halfway between conductor and insulator, it's a semiconductor. Okay, so the electrical charge of a material can be altered through charging. So the process is either adding or removing electrons from an object. This can be done through various methods, including friction, conduction, and induction. So a charged object has imbalance of positive and negative charges, meaning it's not electrically neutral. So let's talk about charging. The first method is charging by conduction. So this is a very direct mode of charging because you just need to put in contact a charged material and a neutral material. So what will happen is that if you have a charged material, then you're going to um, make contact with it by the neutral material. So what will happen is that the charge from the charged material will flow to the neutral material, just like what is shown in this illustration. So we have here a sphere that is negatively charged, na siya yung mga negative charges. And then once you tap it on this metal rod here in the middle, so what will happen is that the electrons or the electrical charges will flow from the sphere to the metal rod. And then once you stop the contact, the charges would remain on those electrical rods remaining. So the charges will remain on the transferred charges would remain on the electrical rod. And also remember our first principle, the first conservation of charges. If we're going to count the charges here, so we begin with how many charges? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then if you're going to add the charges, it should still be 7. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So These charges should not exist. So if you started with a net charge of -7, the end product would have a net charge of -7. Okay, so we have here, di ba? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's charging by conduction. So similar principles happen when we use a positively charged object. Next, we have here charging by friction. So charging by friction happens when you rub two objects together. So what will happen when you rub the material with higher electron affinity will have the electrons at the end of the contact. So again, the higher the electron affinity, the higher the number of electrons will be. So what will happen is that when you rub a material with low affinity and high affinity, the electrons from the material with low affinity will travel to the material with high electron affinity, making the low electron affinity material positive and the higher electron affinity material negative. So we have here some examples and illustrations. So on the right, so we have here two plastic rods, and then it was being rubbed with fur. So at the initial state, when you try to uh what do you call this? When you try to put together the rods, since they are neutral, so they will not attract nor repel each other. But if you once you rub it with fur, so fur has, so let's take a look at these notes below. So we have here the lowest to highest electron affinity. So from the lowest, we have fur, followed by the glass rod, and then plastic rod and silk. So our fur actually has low electron affinity, while our plastic rod has relatively higher electron affinity. So what will happen? The electrons from the fur will transfer to the plastic. Again, the electrons from the fur will transfer to the plastic, making the plastic negatively charged while the fur will become positively charged. So if you try to, after rubbing and then try to put together the plastic rod, so they will actually repel each other. Okay? Same case with the illustration in the middle. But in this case, our silk has higher electron affinity and our glass has lower electron affinity. So what will happen is that the electrons from the glass will travel to the silk. So what will happen? The glass will become positive while the silk will become negative. Okay? Then once you try to put together the glass rod, they will actually repel each other since they are both positively charged. And if you try to put together the plastic rod and the glass rod that are after rubbing, so they would actually attract because the plastic rod is negative and the glass rod is positive. Same is true when you put together the fur and the silk. No, no. When you put together the glass rod and the silk and and then the plastic rod and the fur. Okay? So that's charging by friction. Next is charging by induction. So this is in contrary to charging by conduction. So in conduction kanina, there's contact. But in charging by induction, there's actually no contact. So a method of charging a conductor by using the influence of a nearby charged object without direct contact. So it involves rearranging the charges within the neutral conductor, creating a temporary separation of charges. For example, you have here at the figure I, so you have there a neutral metal ball, meaning the number of its charges, positive and negative, are equal. And then once you try to put a negatively charged rod near that neutral metal ball, what will happen is that the charges within the metal ball will be polarized. Okay? Polarized, meaning the metal ball would have a positive pole and a negative pole. And then the positive pole will become, so since the metal rod is in this location, it would attract the positive charge of the metal ball. That is why in the left side of the metal ball, it's positive, and then the other side is negative because the negative charges are actually being repelled from the to going repelled to that side. And then once you put a wire the electron will travel to the ground. So ground is just a I will say current coat place with low electrical resistance. So if mababa ang electrical resistance, so the electrons would actually prefer to go there. So by the way, electrons, if you try to make electrons choose between two paths, so electrons would actually choose to move to a path with low resistance. That is why the electrons here move going to the ground. And once you remove the rod, so the charges would stay the same. So maiiwan yung positive charges sa ang ating sphere. So that's charging by induction. So again, if there's contact, so just contact, that's charging by conduction. Pero if you are going to rub and introduce friction, that's charging by friction. And then if you try to place a charged object near another object and then try to induce polarization, that's charging by induction. So those are the three ways to charge or to do charging. Next, let's talk about Coulomb's law. So Coulomb's law basically talks about the force between two charges. Okay, so the magnitude, according to Coulomb's law, the magnitude of the electric force between two point charges is directly proportional to the product of the charges and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. So we have here on the upper illustration, we have two protons. So actually, by the way, again, so as we recall earlier, so if you have two protons or even two electrons, what will happen is that the force between them will become what? Repulsion. Okay, that is why if we're going to look at here, so we have here the F1 on 2. So F1 on 2 is the force on charge 2 due to charge 1. Again, F1 on 2 is the force on charge 2 due to charge 1. And since they are both positive, the force between them will be repulsion. That is why our force here is moving away from charge 1. Same happens with charge 1 here at the top. So F2 on 1 here is the force on charge 1 due to charge 2. And then the direction of the force is away from charge 2. Okay, and then we have here the distance r. And then if you have opposite charges, so just like the one here at the bottom illustration, so you have a negative and a positive charge. If you can see, the force of direction of the force actually approaches towards the other charge because again opposites attract. So that's Coulomb's law. So when we can write Coulomb's law mathematically, so we express it as F or force equals to K. So K is our proportionality constant times the product of the absolute value of the two charges, magnitude of the two charges, Q1 and Q2, and R squared over R squared, distance between the point charge charges. By the way, when doing calculations related to Coulomb's law, so we should make sure that our units should be in metric system. So the distance should be in meters, our charge should be in coulomb, and the proportionality constant. So there's no other value for proportionality constant. So that's the reason why we should use SI units because there's no derived values equivalent to this value of the proportionality constant. And also force. So again, since this we are talking about force, this is a vector. Okay? And if you try to put directions, if it's not somewhat conventional direction, meaning it's not east, west, south, north, we can actually write the angle here. So angle will represent the angle. For example, you have a force going here. So our theta angle would be measured from the positive x-axis going to that force. Okay, so that would be our theta. So that would indicate the direction of the force. So okay, later on, we will have examples on that. Okay, so the proportionality constant, K, can be written as K of equals to 1 over 4 pi EO. So personally, I prefer to use this format because it would introduce a lot more accuracy and precision in our calculations. So if you have your calculator, you can actually see, if you have a Casio calculator, you can actually see the electric constant being the constant number 32 in our calculator. So EO or E sub 0 or E sub naught is equals to, or epsilon sub naught is equals to 8.854 times 10 to the power of negative 12 coulomb squared per Newton meter squared. So if you're going to input this value here, so we can actually approximate K as 9.0 times 10 to the power of negative 9 times 10 to the power of positive 9 Newton meter squared per second squared. Okay, so let's have an example. So charge A and B, so we have 1.2 nanocoulomb and 1.8 nanocoulomb respectively, are placed 50 centimeter apart. So what is the magnitude? Right. So what is the magnitude and direction of the force applied to charge B? So let's start by writing the given. Or if what I prefer is that I actually draw the given. So I make some illustrations. So first we have here given, we're given a charge of 1.2 nanocoulomb. That's our QA. And then we have another charge, 1.8 nanocoulomb. That's our QB. Okay? And then the distance between them is 50 centimeters. But again, in dealing forces, specifically in Coulomb's law, we should use metric systems. To convert, 50 centimeter is equals to 0.5 meters. So question, what is the magnitude of the direction of the force applied to the charge B? So we're looking for FA on B. So FA on B is the force applied to QB due to QA. So let me erase it. Okay. And then the direction of our QB, since both QA and QB are positive, so the direction of FA on B should be away from QA. So if you're going to write a straight line from QA to QB, so FA on B would be directed along that line away from QA. Okay, so let's start with our solution. So since these are charges, so we're going to use Coulomb's law. So we have here FA on B equals to our proportionality constant times the absolute value of QA times QB over R squared. So let's input our data. Okay. So you have there 9 times 10 to the power of 9 times the product of the charges over the distance 0.5 squared. So if you're going to calculate that, that will result to 77.76 times 10 to the power of negative 9 Newton. And our direction is along, away from A, along the line joining the charges. So that would be our final answer. Okay, so next problem. So we have 2-point charges, Q1, which is positive 25 nanocoulombs, and Q2, negative 75 nanocoulombs, are separated by a distance r 3 centimeters. So find the magnitude and direction of the electric force that Q2 exerts on Q1. Okay, Q2 exerts on Q1. So meaning that is F2 on 1. Okay, so let's start by illustrating the given. So we have charge 1, 25 times 10 to the power of negative 9, so that's nanocoulomb. And then charge 2, negative 75 times 10 to the power of negative 9 column. And the distance between them is 3 centimeters. So in metric system, that is 0.03 meters. Okay, so we're looking for F2 on 1. So the force exerted on 1 due to charge 2. And as you can see, the direction of our force is towards charge 2 because positive and negative again, they attract each other. So again, we are looking for F2 on 1, the force exerted by charge 2 on charge 1. So to calculate, again, let's use the Coulomb's law. Then input the given. Then we arrive to the answer 0.01875 Newton. Direction towards Q1. That should be towards Q2. Sorry for the typo. Towards Q2 along the line joining the two charges. Excuse me. Okay, so that's our answer. So another sample problem. So two charges, Q1, which is negative 1.5 microcoulomb, and Q2 positive 2.2 millicoulomb are located at the origin and at 3, 4 meters respectively. We find the magnitude of the direction of the electric force that Q1 exerts on Q2. So we're looking for F2 on 1. So let's try to plot the charges. So since we are given with coordinates, so we should use the Cartesian plane. Okay, so let's draw the given. Okay, so first we have a charge Q1 at the origin. So which is negative 1.5 times 10 to the power of negative 6 coulomb. And charge 2 located at 3, 4 meters. Okay? So that's our charge 2 equal to 2.2 plus times 10 to the power of negative 3 coulombs. And again, we're looking for F2 on 1. And since it's negative and positive, so the direction of the force should be towards charge 1. Okay, so F1 on 2, that is our force. Okay, so distance R. So we can calculate actually distance R because we know that the x distance, so the distance at the x-axis between the two charges is 3 centimeter and the distance at the y-axis is 4 meters. So we can use Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's solve for the R using our Pythagorean theorem. So we have R is equals to square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared. So that is 5 meters. So since we have now all necessary data for us to use the Coulomb's law, so let's proceed. So solving for the magnitude of F1 on 2. So we have, okay, same formula, Coulomb's law. So input the data. So that would result to 1.188 newtons. So what is the direction? So the direction is, so we can actually write toward Q1. But to specify, we can actually calculate the angle, okay? So if you're going to draw an imaginary axis here, so we can say that our force is directed towards the third quadrant. And as I've said earlier, we can express that direction in angle measured from the positive x-axis counterclockwise going to the force. Okay? So we can calculate that since this is, so from the positive x-axis going to the negative axis, that is 180 degrees. And then we just need to add an angle here to get the final angle. Okay? Sige. So let's try to do that. So again, let's call the angle here as beta. Then again, we have there the 180-degree angle. So the direction of the force can be represented by an angle theta relative to the positive x-axis. So we're looking for angle theta. So here, the angle theta. So looking at the illustration, you can say that theta is equals to 180 plus beta. So how can we calculate for beta? So we can calculate beta since we are given these numbers here. But we have, and if you're going to draw the force all the way to the charge 1, you would get a right triangle. Okay? And then, since you have right triangle, we can actually use our Pythagorean, our trigonometric identities. Specifically, we can use tangent. Okay? So just a brief review, tangent theta, or the tangent of an angle is equals to the opposite side over the adjacent side. So the opposite here is our 4 meters, so that's our opposite. Since it is the side directly facing the angle. And then we have here our adjacent. So when we say adjacent, it's the side nearest to the angle. Okay? So we can write that as 180 plus the arctangent of 4 over 3. So how did I arrive with arctan 4 over 3? Diba again? That's tangent theta is equals to opposite. So we have opposite here, 4 over 3. So to solve for the angle, so you can rewrite that as arctan 4 over 3. And then add 180 to get the actual direction. So solving, so we can get the angle 233.13 degrees. So again, this angle is measured from the positive x-axis. Okay, hence, we can write the electric force F1 on 2 as a vector in the polar form. So here. So we have F1 on 2 is equals to 1.188 angle 233.13. So again, this F1 on 8 is the magnitude of the force we have calculated earlier. So that's our answer. Okay? So again, we can write the direction as an angle measured from the positive x-axis going counterclockwise. Okay? So if you want, you can actually do clockwise, but it is negative. Okay, so let's have sample problem number 5. So 3-point charges, Q1, which is 2 microcoulomb, Q2, negative 1.5 microcoulomb, and Q3, positive 3.2 microcoulomb, are placed in negative 0.2, 0.2 meters, 0.6, 0 meters, and 0, negative 0.8 meters respectively. Find the magnitude of the direction and the electric force acting on Q1. So we can do this the same method earlier. So we just need first to plot our given. Excuse me. Okay. So the first we are given with the charge Q1 equals to positive 2 microcoulomb, or that is 2 times 10 to the power of negative 6 coulomb located at negative 0.2, 0.2. And then another charge equivalent to negative 1.5 microcoulomb, or that is negative 1.5 times 10 to the power of negative 6 coulomb. Okay, located at 0.6, 0. And the third charge, located at 0, negative 0.8, is 3.2 times 10 to the power of 6. So we are actually looking for the force acting on Q1. So if you can see, there are actually two forces working here. The force due to Q2 and the force due to Q3. So to solve for the total force, we just need to get the resultant vector of these two forces. To solve problems like this, okay, I have written a note here. To solve problems like this, where forces do not act parallel to any axis, we need to calculate first the x and y components of each force, then proceed to calculating resultant force using vector addition. So we can add all the x components of F2 on 1 and the F3 on 1, and then add the y components of the forces. And then we can now solve for the magnitude of the resultant force. Okay, so mathematically, so that's our form. So in two-dimensional component form, so that's actually written like this. Okay, so what's happening here is that we added the x components of F2 on 1 and F3 on x to get the total x component of our resultant force. The same thing with our y components. So what are these symbols? So these symbols, I hat and j hat, are actually unit vectors. So unit vectors represents a certain direction in your vector. So I hat represents the x direction, and then j hat represents the y direction. So if you have third dimension, the z axis, that would be represented by k hat. Again, I hat represents x direction, j hat represents our y direction, and k hat, if ever there's a need to use it, represents our z axis or z direction. Okay, let's first consider F2 on 1. So again, F2 on 1 is the force acting on 1 due to charge 2. And since Q1 is positive and Q2 is negative, so the nature of the force should be attraction. So that is why the force F2 on 1 is directed towards Q2. Okay, so let's solve for the distance Q1 between the Q1 and Q2. So we have there, so if you're going to count the grid lines, so by the way, the grid lines represents, so 1 is to 0.2 meters. That's our scale of the grid line. So each grid line represents 0.2. That is why the y distance between our Q1 and Q2 is 0.2 meters, and the x distance is 0.8 meters. So we can use, so what I use here is the distance formula. So since you are given with points or coordinates, you can actually use distance formula. So to recall, distance formula, that's equal to r is equals to, we have y squared minus y1, y2 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared. Okay? Excuse me. Okay? So, plugging in the values of the coordinates, we would get a distance of 0.8246 meters. So that's the value of our R. Okay, solving for the magnitude of F2 on 1 using Coulomb's law. Okay, so input. So we have the magnitude of our F2 on 1 equivalent to 39.71 times 10 to the power of negative 3 newtons. Okay, now let's try to solve for the direction angle of F2 on 1 relative to positive x-axis. So if you're going to draw an imaginary line in the tail of our vector, so we can see that the direction angle measured from the positive axis is this. Okay? So that is, so from positive x-axis to negative y-axis, diba, that is 270 degrees. And then to get the total angle direction, we need this angle. Okay? So we can still use arctan. So tangent, so let's label this as angle beta. So tangent beta is equivalent to opposite, that have 0.8 over 0.2. So beta is actually equals to arctan negative 1, arctan of 0.8 over 0.2. So we can write our angle theta as 270 plus arctan 0.8 over 0.2. So that would be equal to 345.96 degrees. So hence, so we have here the F2 on 1 on polar form, that is 39.71 times 10 to the power of negative 3, angle 345.96 degrees. So let's not forget the unit, newtons. Okay, so that's the force F2 on 1. So how about F3 on 1? Okay, so we have here the force Q3 at 0, 0.8 having 3.2 times 10 to the negative 6 Coulomb charge. And since we are looking for the force acting on charge 1, as you can see here, the direction of our force is somehow pushing Q1 away, okay? Since this is repulsion, okay? That is why, again, F3 on 1 seems to be pushing charge 1, okay? Let's solve for the distance R for us to continue with the Coulomb's law. So we have here the x component of the distance is 0.2, and while the y component is 1. So solving using you can actually use Pythagorean theorem, and you can actually use pwede rin ang distance formula. So for this example, I have used the distance formula. So that would result to 1.0198 meters. Okay, solving for the magnitude of F3 on 1. So we have the Coulomb's law, then plug in the values, and that would give you 55.39 times 10 to the power of negative 3 newtons. And how about the angle? So again, by the way, when drawing the uh, imaginary Cartesian plane for our resultant vector or our vector, we should always start at the tail. So meaning, for this case, this is our tail. Okay, so let's draw saan eh? An imaginary plane here. So looking at here, so we can have measured from the positive axis, this would be our angle. And then from positive x-axis to positive y-axis, that is 90 degrees. And then we have this angle here, let's call that beta. So beta na to, that is equivalent to arctan 0.2 over 1. Since 0.2 is at the opposite side of the right triangle. Okay? So we can solve our theta, again, 90 degrees plus arctan 0.2 over 1. So that would result to 101.31. Okay, so hence we can write our F3 on 1 as a vector in polar form, 55.39 times 10 to negative 3, angle 101.31 in newtons. So that's our F3 on 1. But we are not yet done because we only calculated the individual forces. We have not calculated the actual resultant force. Again, to solve for the actual resultant force, we need to add all x components of the forces and all the y components of the forces, and then proceed to calculating the magnitude of the resultant force. So let's do that. So let's start by solving for the x and y components of F2 on 1, so with equivalent polar form. So to solve for the F21x, that is just 39.71 times 10 to negative 3 cosine 345.96 equivalent to 38.5237 times 10 to negative 3 Newton. And then the y component of F2 on 1, that's just the the magnitude times sine of 345.96, which is negative 9.63336 times 10 to the power of negative 3 Newton. So if you're going to look at the angle here, diba? If you're going to draw a Cartesian plane, so our F2 on 1 actually is located at the fourth quadrant since it's greater than 270 degrees but less than 360 degrees. So if you're going to look at or examine our x and y components, our x component is actually positive and our y component is negative. So that's consistent with our Cartesian plane because, diba? This is x, positive x, and then this is negative y. So in the fourth quadrant, the x is positive and our y component is negative. Okay? So let's do the same thing with our F3 on 1 having that particular polar form. So the same process. So this would yield with the x component being negative 10.8629 times 10 to negative 3 newtons and the y component 54.3144 times 10 to negative 3 newtons. Okay? So, since we have these x and y components, we can proceed to calculating the magnitude of the resultant force. So, the magnitude of the resultant force is just equal to the square root of the summation of all forces along x and the summation of the forces along y. So, how did we come up with that formula? So, again, let's go back to our vector. So, since, for example, this is our vector, I know, let's try to replicate the actual, let's do this now. So, since, first, for example, this is your vector A, okay, just a brief review. Diba, we can write this vector as its x component. So, we have here our AX and then our AY. Okay? So if you're going to be given we're given with AX and AY, you can actually use these values to solve for the vector A, the magnitude of vector A using the Pythagorean theorem. So the magnitude of vector A, that's equal to ax squared plus ay squared. So we did the same thing here. We just added a summation function here because we're going to add the x component of f2 on 1 and f3 on 1. Same with the y components of f2 on 1 and f3 on 1. Okay? So we have there the sum of the x components and the y components. So let's input what we have calculated earlier. So we got those values. Then simplifying, and then finally, so we got the magnitude of our resultant force being 55.5499 times 10 to negative 3 newtons. So that's our magnitude. But we are not yet done because again, force is a vector, so it needs a direction. So to solve for the direction, we're going to use the angular form. Okay, so let's go back. So if you can observe here, the sum of the forces are actually both positive. So we have here the sum of the forces along x and then the sum of forces along y. So what can we infer about the direction of the resultant force? Positive fx and then positive fy is also positive. So if both x and y are positive, meaning our resultant vector is actually can actually be found on the first quadrant. Okay? So since it's in the first quadrant, okay? So you have here our this is our x, this is our y. So we can actually solve for the direction angle measured from the positive x-axis as arctan y over x. So that would be our theta. Okay? Okay, so we just plug in the values for the summation of forces along y and summation of forces along x. By the way, we got that using these values here. Okay, let's go back. So that's the angle. So 58.2394. Okay, so therefore, the polar form, the resultant force acting on Q1 due to Q2 and Q3 is, okay, we have there the magnitude, and then the angle. So vector FR1 or the force acting on Q1 due to charge 2 and charge 3 is equivalent to 52.5499 times 10 to negative 3 angle 58.2394 newtons. So that would be our final answer. Okay? So let's now proceed to calculating our practice problem. So we have here practice problem number 21.6. So we are given two small spheres spaced 20 centimeter apart and have equal charge. So how many excess electrons must be present on each sphere if the magnitude of the force of repulsion between them is 3.33 times 10 to negative 21 newtons. So let's start by having a illustration. So I have already made an illustration here for us to have for us to save time. Okay. So we have here we're given again Q1 and Q2 are the magnitude of Q1 and Q2 are equal. So Q1 and Q2 is equal. So let's call these charges as Q. So since they are equal. And then the force of repulsion acting between the two charges is F 3.33 times 10 to negative 21 newtons, and the distance between them is 0.2 meters. So this is our R. Okay, so how are we going to do this problem? So what do we need? So we're looking for actually the excess electrons. So the electrons in this, no, let's make it black. So the electrons in this sphere and the electrons in this sphere. So since we know that the charge on Q1 and Q2 are equal, similarly, the number of excess electrons should be also equal. Okay, so how are we going to know the number of electrons? So earlier, we have introduced the formula for the for the charge given a number of electrons. But we do not know the value of our Q1 and Q2. So let's start first by calculating the value of Q1 and Q2 using our Coulomb's law. So given, using our formula for Coulomb's law, we have F is equals to K, absolute value of, since we have written Q1 and Q2 as Q since they are equal, so let's do Q times Q, that becomes Q squared. So let me reassign the absolute value. So absolute value of R squared. Okay, so let's rearrange the equation. So let's move the K and R on the other side. So we have absolute value of Q squared is equals to F R squared over K, or our Q is equals to, absolute value of Q is equals to square root of F R squared over K. Okay, so let's input our data. So we know the force is equal to 3.33. 3.33 times 10 to negative 21. And our distance is 0.2. 0.2 squared. And then, our K, we know that is approximately equal to 9 times 10 to the power of 9. So we can now calculate for our Q. So that would result to 1.2166 times 10 to the power of negative 16 coulomb. Okay? And since we are dealing with electrons, that would mean that our charge is negative. Okay, so that's the charge of each of these uh, particles. Okay, so Q1 is negative 1.2166 times 10 to the negative 16. Same with charge 2. Okay, so since you already have the number or the charge of each of the particle, we can proceed to calculating the number of excess electrons. So we have the formula. Q is equals to, since we're dealing with electrons, that should be negative NE. Okay? So let's proceed. So we have Q, let's rearrange. So you have the number of electrons that would be equal to negative Q over E. So, okay, so let's put the values. So we have N, so you have negative. Our charge is negative 1.2166 times 10 to the power of negative 16. And then our elementary charge is 1.602 times 10 to the power of negative 19. Okay? So, so actually the answer is around 759. But since we do not have, that's around 7, the answer is around 759.4. But again, we know that charge is quantized, meaning we cannot have value for n that is not an integer. So we should round this up. So we have the answer 760 electrons. So that's our final answer. Okay, again, electrons are quantized. That is why our answer should be in integers. Okay, we round up to 760. So approximately 760 electrons. So by the way, in this presentation, I also included a clear version of the solution, which you can view once you have removed the annotations. So here's the clear, uh, much clearer version of the calculations. Okay. So next, let's do practice problem number 21.17. So 2-point charges are located on the y-axis as follows. So we have charge Q1 equals to 1.8 nanocoulomb, and at y equals to negative 0.575 meters. And charge 2 positive 3.2 nanocoulomns at the origin where y is equals to 0. So question, what is the total force, magnitude, and direction exerted by these two charges on a third charge, positive 5.35 nanocoulomb located at y is equals to negative 0.420 meters. So let's start by having an illustration. So we have here, so again, if you're going to look at the values of the placements of our charges, so they are actually located in the y-axis. So that is why I have drawn a y-axis here. Okay, first, we are given with charge 1 equivalent to negative 1.8 times 10 to negative 9 coulomb located at 0, 0, negative 0.575. And then we have our charge 2 located at the origin, 3.2 times 10 to the power of negative 9 columns. And in between charge 2 and charge 3, we have charge 2 and charge 1, we have charge 3 equivalent to 5.35 times 10 to negative 9 columns. So 0, negative 0.42. So again, to solve this kind of problem, we must, to solve the actual total force or the resultant force, we need first to calculate the individual forces acting on Q3 due to Q1 and Q2. Okay? The resultant force FR3 is equivalent to F1 on 3 plus F2 on 3. So let's consider first F1 on 3. Okay? So F1 on 3, so if we're going to look at our charges, so charge 3 is positive and charge 1 is negative. So therefore, the direction of our force should be towards charge 1. So F1 on 3 should be directed towards charge 1. Okay? So let's start to solve for the distance and between Q1 and Q2. So we have here R is equals to, so this, I had, okay. So let me finish first the calculation, then later on there will be animation that will show the actual solution in much clearer version. So let's start by calculating the distance R. So distance between Q1 and Q3. So since we are given with points on the our uh, Cartesian plane, we can use the distance formula. So let's have R is equals to square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay. So that's equal to R equivalent to. So since there is no zero coordinates here, okay, that is 0 plus, so let's try this as y2. So we're, this is y2, 0.42. So we have negative 0.42 minus negative, so that will become positive 0.575 squared. So we have a distance of 0.155 meters. So 0.155 meters. Excuse me. Okay. So that's the distance between the charges. Then we can proceed to calculating the uh, magnitude of our F1 on 3 using Coulomb's law. So F1 on 3 is equivalent to K times the absolute value of Q1 times Q3 over R squared. So R squared. Okay, let's plug in the values. So K na to, you have 9 times 10 to the power of 9 times absolute value of Q1, which is negative 1.8 times 10 to negative 9 times our Q2, 5.35 times 10 to the power of negative 9. Okay? over our distance 0.155 squared. So our answer for the magnitude of F1 on 3, that's equal to 3.607 times 10 to the power of negative 6 newtons. Okay? So if we're going to look at here, our F1 on 3 is actually directed downwards, no? Because it has no x component. So we can write the direction as downward along the negative y-axis. Okay? So down along the negative y-axis. So that's the magnitude and direction of our F1 on 3. So there's actually solution here, much clearer version. Okay. And then let's try to solve for, I consider F2 on 3. So if you're going to look at the charges Q2 and Q3, so they are both positive. Therefore, the force is repulsion. So the force on charge 3 due to charge 2, so the direction should be away from charge 2. Okay? Okay, so let's solve first for the distance between Q2 and Q3. So we have R. So the same process, we will going to use the distance formula. So you have R is equals to square root of, you have, for the X, you have 0 plus, so let's do this, is Y2, this is Y1. Okay. So that becomes 0 minus negative 0.42, that becomes plus 0.42 squared. So actually, no, you can actually write it directly 0.42 meters. Okay. Then we can proceed to calculating the magnitude of F2 on 3 using Coulomb's law. So we have F2 on 3. Again, F2 on 3 is the force exerted by charge 2 on charge 3. Okay. F2 on 3 is equals to our K. We have 9 times 10 to the power of 9 times our charges. So Q2, we have 3.2 times 10 to the power of negative 9. And then we have Q3, 5.35 times 10 to the power of negative 9. All over the distance, 0.42 squared. Okay? So now we can get the magnitude of F2 on 3. So that's equal to 0.873 times 10 to the power of negative 6 Newton. And the distance or the direction, that's down, still downward, so down along the negative y-axis. Negative y-axis. Okay? So that's the F2 on 3. So we have now already calculated the values for F2 on 3 and F1 on 3. So we can now solve for the resultant force. So in the resultant force, since F2 on 3 and F1 on 3 only have the y components, it means that the magnitudes of these individual forces is equal to their y components. And therefore, our resultant force FR3 is equivalent to the sum of the magnitudes of these two forces. So we can write FR3, or the force acting on 3 is equivalent to our values earlier. So let me check. So that is, so we have F1 on 3 plus F2 on 3. So FR3, that's equivalent to 3.607 times 10 to the power of negative 6 plus 0.873 times 10 to the power of negative 6. So FR3 is equivalent to, we have 4.48 times 10 to the power of negative 6 newtons. So if you're going to write this on vector form, so with the direction that is down along the negative y-axis. Or you can actually write this in the angular form or polar form. So if we're going to draw, so no, since it is downward, so we can write our FR3 equivalent to 4.48 times 10 to the power of negative 6. So what's our angle? It's directed directly to the negative y-axis. So that is angle 270 degrees. So that's our answer. Or if you want to write it in unit vector, you want to actually do FR3 is equals to. So since there is no x and z components, we only have the y component, and it is directed downwards, so it is negative 4.48 times 10 to the power of negative 6. So let's not forget the Newton, J hat. Okay? So either way, you can use this format. Okay? So again, we put negative here because it's directed downwards. So direction of our unit vector is downwards. That's why we use negative J hat. Okay, again, this is the polar form. And then this is the unit vector or the rectangular form. Okay, I hope that's clear. Okay, so that's the solution. Okay. Okay, so that's all for electric charges. Or that's all for the Coulomb's law. Let's proceed to electric field. So what are electric fields? So let's define these terms. So we define an electric field as a region of space surrounding a charged object where another charged object would experience as force. So it's essentially the influence or reach of an electric charge indicating how other charges would interact with it. So actually, electric field is an imaginary field in which if you're going to put a test charge there, it would actually feel a force. So meaning, if a test charge felt a force on a certain space, meaning there's another charge nearby. Okay? So that's the concept of electric fields. It is an imaginary field produced by a charged atom that would exert force to another charge if it was placed near that first charge. Okay? So to find out experimentally whether there is an electric field at a particular point, we place a small charged object we call a test charge. So by the way, a test charge by convention is always a very small charge with positive na charge. So if the test charge experiences electric force, it means that there is an electric field. So let's differentiate electric field and electric force. Electric force. So electric field is a region around a charge where electric force can be experienced. So again, electric field is a space or a region in which if you're going to put another charge, it would feel force, whether it is repulsive or attractive. So electric force is produced by a charge exists even without other charges. So even if there's only one charge, it would still produce electric field. So describes influence of a charge measured in Newton per coulomb or volts per meter. Meanwhile, our electric force is the actual force experienced by a charge in an electric field. So again, electric force is the force experienced by a charge in an electric field. So again, I would repeat that if another charge is placed if we will know that there's a charge nearby if another charge we place on that similar space would feel an actual force. Okay? So electric force requires at least two charges, the source charge and the test charge, and describes interaction between charges measured in newtons. So mathematically, we define the electric field, the vector E at a point as the electric force, a vector FO experienced by a test charge QO at the point divided by the charge QO. So we have here the formula for the electric field. So that's force over the test charge, the value of the test charge. So substituting uh, equation 5 to our equation 6. Equation 6, okay, so equation 6, we yield this one. So we have equation 6 here, our Coulomb's law. So if we're going to substitute the value of, so we can derive the value of FO here. So FO is equals to EQO. So if we're going to substitute this one in the Coulomb's law, that would give us the formula E equals to KQ over R squared. Okay? So how did we derive that one? So let's try. Okay? So we have here, so let's transfer Q on the other side. So we have over QO. Okay? So that would result to K, absolute value of Q, over R squared. And then we know this expression is equals to E. So as mentioned here. Okay? That is why we have this formula. So electric field is equals to K times absolute value of Q over R squared. So we have here the point charge Q produces electric field E at all points in space. So the field strength decreases with increasing distance. So by the way, by convention, the direction of the electric field when it is coming from a positively charged, so it should be away from the source charge if it is positive. And then if it is negative, and the source charge is negative, so the electric field produced will be directed towards that negative charge. So the total electric field at a point P is the vector sum of the fields at P due to each point charge in the charge distribution. So meaning, if you have multiple charges and then you want to measure the electric field at a certain point around those two charges or more or other charges, so that would become the total electric field at that point is the vector sum of the individual electric field produced by each of those charges. So that is why we write here the vector E or the total electric field is equivalent to the vector sum of all the individual electric field. So we can write that in component form. So similar thing we did on the forces, we added the X components of the electric field and all the Y components of the electric field. So again, we're just doing two-dimensional calculations. That is why we only have I hat and J hat corresponding to X and Y directions. So let's try to solve a problem. So a point charge, Q is equals to negative 0.8 nanocoulomb is located at the origin. Find the electric field vector at the field point x equals to 1.2 meters, y is equals to 1.6, negative 1.6 meters. So we're given coordinates. That is why we need to plot our given. So again, we are given with the charge Q, negative 0.2 at the origin. Okay, and then we are solving for the electric field at point 1.2 comma negative 1.6 meters. So the electric field to that point. Okay, and since we are dealing with a negative charge, so the direction of the electric field lines is toward the charge. So papasok or towards the negative charge. So this is the direction of our electric field. Okay, so to solve for the distance, so let's look at the x and y components if we're going to draw a right triangle. So for the distance on the x component, that is 1.2 meters, and the distance on the y component is 1.6 meters. So we can solve for the magnitude of the electric field. So using the formula given earlier, E equals to KQ over R squared. But instead of putting R, we are going to use directly our Pythagorean theorem. So that is why we have this expression. So again, this is just Pythagorean theorem. Okay? So we have get a value of the electric field. The magnitude is 18 newtons per column. So let's try to solve for the direction of that electric field. So again, we're going to start at the tail of the vector. So if we're going to draw an imaginary axis here, then measure the angle from the positive x-axis. That would be our direction. So basically, that is 90 plus this angle. So let's call that angle beta. And beta is just arctan of the opposite, which is 1.2 over the adjacent 1.6. So it would give us 1.26.87. Or we can write the field E in polar form. So we have there 18 angle 126.87 Newton per column. So that's our answer. Or we can write it in the rectangular form to solve. So we can do this. The same method we have used in solving for the force earlier. So to get the x component, we just do 18 cosine the angle, I hat, plus to get the y component, we have 18 sine the angle, j hat. That would result to an electric field in the unit vector negative 10.8 I hat plus 14.4 J hat Newton per column. So depending on the problem, so you can choose between these two answers. So again, our answer is 18 angle 1.26.87 Newton per column or negative 10.8 I hat plus 14.4 J hat Newton per column. Okay, so let's do sample problem number 7. Okay, point charge Q1 is equals to negative 5.0 nano column at the origin and point charge Q2 at, excuse me, positive 3 nanocoulomb is on the x-axis and x equals to 3.0 centimeter. Point P is on the y-axis at y equals to 4 centimeter. Calculate the total electric field point due to Q1 and Q2. So again, when calculating for the total electric field generated due to multiple charges, we're going to do the vector sum of those individual electric fields. So to illustrate, we have this Cartesian plane. So again, we're given Q1 equals to negative 5.6 times 10 to the negative 9 column located at the origin. And then Q2 equals to 3 times 10 to the power of negative 9 columns located at 0.03, comma, 0 meters. And then we're looking for the electric field at point 0, comma, 0.04 meters. Okay, so we just converted the given centimeters into meters and then plot it accordingly. Okay, so we have here our electric field line. So for E1, so that's the electric field generated by charge 1. So as you can see, the direction of the field line is towards Q1 since it is negative. And then our E2 is away from the charge since it is positive. So as you can see here, our E2 is actually inclined. So we can write that as components of X and Y. So we can write E2 as the sum of the components E2X plus E2Y. Okay? So let's continue by solving for the magnitude of the electric field due to Q1. So due to Q1, let's just neglect first our Q2. So let's focus on Q1. So using our formula for electric field, E1 is equals to K over Q1 over R squared. So we have there, input the values. So that would give us 28,125 Newton per coulomb. So that's the magnitude of our electric field. So how about since the electric field line is directed directly towards downward, so we can write it in rectangular form or polar form such as this. So in polar form, it's equivalent to 28.125 angle 270 since again, it's downward. Or in unit vector that is negative 28.125 J hat Newton per coulomb. So that's the vector form of our E1. Next, let's consider E2 or charge 2. So to solve for let's start with by solving the magnitude of the electric field due to Q2. So we can use the formula and then proceed to plugging in the inputs. Again, this one is just Pythagorean theorem. So since we can see here that the distance x is 0.03 and the distance y is 0.04 between the point and our charge Q2. So that would result to 10,800 Newton per coulomb magnitude for the electric field due to Q2. And then to solve for the direction, so if you're going to draw an imaginary Cartesian plane here, so that would result to this angle. So that is this angle 90 plus this angle beta here. So basically, our angle is just 90 plus the arctangent of 0.03 over 0.04. So why is it 0.03? So let's try to look at this rectangle here. So since this is 0.03 and this is 0.04, so by the properties of triangles or rectangles, so we can say that this is also 0.03. This is also 0.04. And the opposite of the angle beta is 0.03. That is why it's on the numerator. And the adjacent is 0.04. So the angle of our E2 is 126.87. So to solve for the electric field E2, we can actually write it in polar form or uh, we can calculate its rectangular form such as this. To solve for the x components, that's just 10,800 cosine the angle plus the y component, 10,800 sine the angle. So that results to negative 6480 I hat plus 8640 J hat Newton per coulomb. So since we already had E1 and E2 in component form, we can proceed to calculating the total electric field at point P. Okay? So adding the x components and the y components, so it gives us, for the x components, that's 0 minus 6480. So since our E1, di ba, it's directed downwards, meaning it has no x components. That is why we have written 0. Okay? Minus the x component of our E2, 6480. Plus the x component of y component of E1 that is negative 281125 and the y components of our E2. So that results to this value in unit vector. So that's negative 6480 I hat minus 19485 J hat Newton per coulomb. Or in polar form, so that's the magnitude, angle, theta. And to solve for the magnitude, again, we can use the Pythagorean theorem there. And then for the angle, but that is, why did we add 180? So if we're going to look at the x and y components here, they are both negative. So since they are negative, they are directed towards the third, I know, towards here, to this, towards the third quadrant. So that's 180 plus the angle beta. Okay? This is our x, this is our y. So our theta, the total angle is 180 plus arctan of our beta. Okay? So that would mean our electric field in the angle or polar form is 2534 angle 251.6 Newton per coulomb. So depending on the question, so you can actually use both answers. Okay, so that's sample number 7. So we are nearing the end. So let's do practice problem 21.34. So the two charges Q1 and Q2 shown in figure E21.34 have equal magnitudes. So what is the direction of the net electric field due to these two charges at points A, midway between the charges B and C? If A first, both charges are negative. Next, both charges positive, and Q1 is positive and Q2 is negative. Excuse me. Okay, so let's try the first question. Okay, so let's do both charges are negative. So this one is negative. This one is also negative. So let's recall when charges are negative, di ba? The electric field line is what? Away or towards? So towards the charge. So our electric field line here is toward our charges. Okay, so for A, so that's our charge electric field line. So A. And since, di ba, Q1 and Q2 are equal, as mentioned in the problem, we can say that the electric field at A due to Q2 is equivalent to the electric field, the magnitude is equivalent to the electric field due to Q1. Okay, again, that's just the magnitude. Okay, let's try to solve 4. So at point A. Okay, so looking at this diagram of the electric field lines, you can say that the sum of the forces, or the sum of the electric field at point A, label na to as point A, so that's a vector, is equal to the sum of this vector here and this vector here. So let's do the vector for the Q2. As you can see, the direction of EA due to Q2 is going to the right, meaning that's positive. So we can write that as A sub A, it's in the X direction, so we have to use I hat. Okay? And then for the electric field due to Q1, that is negative because it is due west. So we can write that as negative EAJ hat. Okay, so that would result to an electric field of 0. Okay, so when both charges are negative, there is no electric field at point A. Next, so no electric field. Okay, next, let's do point B. So I have our point here. So again, our electric field lines will be directed away from towards the charges. So we have this. So we have this electric field. So again, Q1 and Q2 are equal magnitudes. So meaning the magnitudes of electric field for B emanating from those charges are also equal. So, and since this is the vector drawing of our, what can I say, of our EB, so we can say that it has a components X and Y. So for the X component, it's going there, and the Y component, it's going downward. So this is ABX, and then this is ABY. Similar to the other side. So this is ABX, and then this is ABY. This is our AB, and this is EB. Okay? So, if you're going to solve for the electric field EB, that's equivalent to the sum of the x components and the y components. So let's do first the x components. So looking at EBX, diba, that's going to the right. So that's positive. So we have EBX. And then our EBX for due to Q1 is negative because it is going west. So that is minus EBX. So do not forget the unit vector, that is I. Okay. And then for the y components, so looking at both y components, so we can say that uh, we can observe that EBY for Q1 and Q2 are both going down. So we can say that it is negative EBY minus EBY. So don't forget the unit vector, J hat. Okay, so this is 0. So meaning our EB vector EB is equal to negative 2EBYJ hat. So since we get a negative value with a J hat unit vector, meaning the direction is what? Downward. Okay, you have downward. Okay, so that's the electric field at B when both charges are negative. Next, we have at point C. So let's do the same thing. So again, going to the charge. Our electric field is towards our charge. There. And then this electric field has X and Y components. So X component, and then we have a Y component. Similar with the other side. So X component and then a Y component. Okay. So let's label our vectors. We have EC. Again, magnitudes for Q1 and Q2 are equal. So this, therefore, electric fields for both uh, charges are equal. So EC1 and EC2 are equal. So let's just write it as EC. So we have here the components. This is ECX. Then this is ECY. Then same on the other side. Then this is ECY. Okay? So EC, vector EC, is equivalent to the x components, the sum. So if we're going to look at the x component for the electric field due to Q2, at C is equals to, that's positive, it's going to the right, ACX. And then on the other side, it's going to the left, so that's negative. So ECX. Okay? And then, so let's not forget the unit vector, plus our y components. So if we're going to look at the diagram, both of the y components of EC are going up. So we have ECY plus ECY J hat. Okay, so this is 0. So meaning our EC is equals to, so that's 2ECY J hat. So since you have arrived with a positive vector, so meaning at the J direction, so meaning this is upward. Okay, so these are our answers when both charges are negative. So again, when both charges are negative, there's no electric field at point A, and then at point B, there's a downward electric field, and then at point C, there will be an upward electric field. So here's the clear version of that solution. Okay, next, let's try both charges are positive. So contrary to the letter A, so here we have positive charges. So what we know, if the charge is positive, the electric field lines is directed away from the charge. So therefore, for A, we have a charge directed to A. Okay, so let's label this as EA and EA. So again, they are both EA because Q1 and Q2 have the same magnitude. And A, distance between A and Q1 and distance between A and Q2 are equal. So consider this. Let's consider the electric field at point A. So at point A, so we have vector EA is equals to, if we're going to look at here on the side of the Q1, so EA is going to the right, so that is positive. But on the side of Q2, that is negative since it's going to the left. So we have EA minus EA, we have I hat. So EA, same with the first one, that is equals to 0. So that means there's no electric field. Okay. Next, we have at point. So again, when both charges are positive, there's no electric field at point A. Okay, let's do point B. So at point B, so again, the electric field line is going away from the charge. So we have that vector there. So we have vector E, B. Okay? And then again, we can write this as X and Y components. So we have our Y component, that's EBY. And then our X component, that's EBX. Same with the other side. This is EBY, then this is EBX. So we can calculate, looking at that, so we can calculate our vector EB. So for the X components, if we're going to look at the X component on the side of Q1, so that's positive EBX since it's going to the right. And then on the side of Q2, that's negative EBX because it's going to the left. Okay? So we have I hat. Okay, plus the Y component. So both of them are going up. So meaning both of them are positive. So EBY plus EBY. So J hat. Okay, so that results to EB is equals to 2EBY J hat. So since you have arrived with positive J hat, so the direction is upward. So upward. Okay? So next, at point C. So again, away from the charges. So we have this one and then this one. So this is charge EC. And then again, we can write that as components. So we have this Y component, ECY, and then we have this X component, ECX. Okay. Same on the other side. So we have ECY, and then this one is ECX. Okay. So we can now solve for EC. So vector EC is equals to, for the X components, if we're going to look at the side of the Q1, ECX is going to the right, so meaning it's positive. But on the side of Q2, it's going to the left, so minus ECX I hat. Plus, for the Y components, if we're going to look at them, they are both negative since they are both going downward. So that's negative ECY minus ECY J hat. Okay? So charge vector EC is equivalent to negative 2 ECY J hat. And since you have arrived with negative J hat, meaning the direction is downward. Next, last. So here's the clear version of that solution. So again, when both charges are positive, direction at point A, so there is no electric field. At point B, upward. And then at point C is downward. So, so upward and downward. So let's have Q1 is positive and Q2 is negative. Okay, so let's start by considering point A. So again, Q1 is positive and then Q2 is negative. So for positive charge, so the direction of the electric field line is away. And then, so this is EA. And then for a negative charge, direction is towards the charge. So that is EA. So to solve, so at point A, so unit vector EA is equivalent to, so if you're going to look at them, so EA on the side of Q1 is going to the right, and same with the EA on the side of Q2. So that is why we have EA plus EA direction I hat. So there's no y component. So the vector EA is equivalent to 2EA I hat. And since you have arrived with an answer that's 2 and positive I hat, the direction is going to the right. So towards right. Towards right. Okay? So when Q1 is positive and Q2 is negative, the direction of the electric field at point A is directed towards right. So along the positive x-axis. Okay, at point B, so at point B, so again, let's draw the electric field lines. So for positive, that's away from the charge. And then at negative, that's towards the charge. Okay? So let's draw the components. So for EB, on the side of Q1, the Y component is going up. So this is EB. And then on the X component, it's going right. So that's EBX. Okay? On the side of Q2, the Y component of EB is going down. So that's EBY. And the X component, it's going right. So that is EBX. Okay? So I guess we can solve for the vector EB. So looking at the X components, so you can see that both the components of EB for the X component, both Q1 and Q2, so that's, they're both going to the right, so meaning they're both positive. So we have EBX plus EBX I hat. Okay? And then for the Y components, so for Q1, the Y component is going up. So we have positive, okay, so positive EBY. And then on the side of Q2, EBY is going down. So that's minus EBY. So we have J hat. Okay, so we have EB is equivalent to, so our Y components become 0. So meaning we have 2EBX I hat. So since, oh, sorry, that's I hat. So I hat. So I. So since we get a positive I hat, the direction is the same. So that's towards right. Towards right. Okay, so that's our answer. Okay, last point. So at point C. Okay, so at point C, So again, let's draw the electric field lines. So we have there. And then we have Q2. So going there. And then let's write the x components for Q1. So x component is going right. And then the y component is going down. So this is ECX, and then this is ECY. And then on the other side, Q2, the x component still goes right, so ECX, but the y component goes up. So that is ECY. So now we can solve for the vector EC. So EC, so the sum of x and y components, so for the x, again, they are both going to the right. There. So you have ECX plus ECX I hat. Okay? Plus our y component. So we have one going up and one going down. So we have negative ECY plus ECY J hat. So we can now, so we can now get the answer. So we have vector EC is equivalent to, so this becomes 0. So we got 2ECX I hat. So since positive I hat, so that is towards right. Okay, so that's our answer. Okay, so again, when Q1 is positive and Q2 is positive, Q2 is negative, so at point A, so the direction is going to the right, similar with point B and point C. So going to the right along positive X axis. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you.